Hi lovelies! Welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Maria and today's video is going to be my August reading wrap up. So just me going through all the books I read in August, if I liked them, if I didn't like them, giving you all my thoughts and feelings and just a roundup of my reading month. So August was a pretty good reading month for me. I ended up reading 13 books. I will say that they were mostly fantasy or romantasy, but there was a few contemporary romance in there as well. But for the most part I was trying to start off some of my more autumnal reading because I was just in the mood for it. I just really wanted to pick up some of those books that I've been really excited about for the autumnal season. So I definitely think that helped me to get through so many books because I was just really excited about a lot of these reads. And honestly, autumn is usually my favourite time for reading because I just love the vibes of those books and I read them all year really, but obviously with the autumnal season coming in it was just more the vibes that I was wanting. So definitely helped me pick up a lot more books and get more excited about some books that I was reading this month. So yeah, just gonna go through all the books, give you a bit of a synopsis of what they're about, how I felt about them, if I recommend them, all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's just get into the wrap up. Okay, so the first book I read is Where the Library Hides by Isabel Ibanez, and this is the sequel to What the River Knows, which is kind of a historical fantasy, kind of has the Mummy vibes. You've probably seen it around. It was pretty popular when it first came out and I read it just before that and really loved the first book, gave it 5 stars. We're following a young woman who is from Buenos Aires but essentially her parents live in Egypt. They're archaeologists and they end up passing away and she goes to Cairo to try and figure out what happened to them, and the story kind of goes from there. She ends up getting caught up in all these different kind of criminal machinations and it definitely gave the Mummy vibes, I would say, in the first book. A lot less fantasy-esque, a lot more historical fiction with a little bit of magical realism in there, but overall I really enjoyed it and it ended on quite the twist. So I ended up picking up the second book straight away because I wanted to know what happens, and I did really enjoy book 2. However, I was a little bit disappointed with how some of the events that happened in the first book were approached within this book and how they kind of resolved themselves within this book. I felt like a lot of it was kind of brushed over and just kind of resolved too quickly for my liking, especially with the magnitude of the twist that happened at the end of book 1. But still really enjoyed this. Definitely recommend this for anyone who loves a bit of historical fantasy, maybe anyone who likes like the Divine Rivals kind of vibe but less flowery writing, but it has that historical fiction element to it and it is a bit more magical realism than pure fantasy. I would definitely recommend this for anyone who likes that or anyone who liked The Mummy, the 90s movie The Mummy. In the first book especially you'll get those vibes. So ended up rating 4 stars, did really enjoy it, was a little bit disappointed with the conclusion of it, but overall I think the geology is still a really good read. And then next up I read Tales of a Monstrous Heart by Jennifer Delaney, and this one had kind of been sold to me as Jane Eyre inspired but with fae, and I can kind of get what they're saying with that, but I do think this was just a bit more of a gothic fantasy, which is where they're kind of tying those lines. I wouldn't really say this really tied too much to Jane Eyre. There were some similarities because we do have an FMC who was orphaned when she was young, so that kind of element I could see the similarities, but other than that there wasn't really too much, so I wouldn't read too much into that comparison for this one. However, this was a really good lush gothic romantasy. It was very atmospheric and exactly what I was hoping for when I picked this one up. So we're following Kat, who is this fae within this world where fae have kind of been shunned, they've been pushed out of society, and Kat is trying to get a position at the Institute for Magic and obviously her being fae is holding her back. She needs to get a placement and the only placement that's available is with Lord Blackthorn, who is kind of this revered war hero and most people kind of don't want to go near him because of his reputation, but he agrees to take her on as his apprentice and the story goes from there. We've got a sentient house in here, we've got really solid side characters. I think our FMC was really compelling to read about. I think she was smart, she was quietly brave, and we definitely got to explore some of the demons that she was battling from some of her childhood trauma while we were reading this. I think our MMC, Lord Blackthorn, was definitely just the right amount of dark and brooding, and I think definitely gave off that Mr. Rochester vibe that a lot of people have been talking about. And I just think the partnership between them was really nice to read about as well. It was a really slow but emotionally charged build that didn't rush or anything, you know. This would definitely be the epitome of kind of slow burn, I would say, and I really loved kind of their journey of just emotional healing together essentially throughout their story. And I just think the world in here was really lush and immersive, and there was a very strong human versus fae vibe in here and kind of getting the history to that and how the world built up to that was really, really intriguing and really interesting to read. And it was interesting to read it from a side of the humans being kind of on top, where the Fae have been shunned, where usually we get that trope the other way around. So it was really interesting and unique for me to read about that in this one. I did knock off a star for this one just because I felt the pacing did lag a little bit in the middle. It felt a little bit slow and meandering, and there were quite a few typos and things like that in here and repetitive phrases that usually I don't really care about. You know, I'm definitely not one to judge people's grammar or anything like that, but when it's so often that it's noticeable to me, I'm thinking, yeah, there's probably quite a few in here. So it just did affect my reading at times, but the overall enjoyment wasn't impacted by that. But just because of that pacing in the middle, I did end up knocking a star off this one and giving it 4 stars overall. But overall, I think this is still a page turner if you like gothic romantasy with slow burn romance, sentient houses, emotional depth over the spice that's in here. And I think this one's definitely worth picking up, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Then next up was my book club pick for August, and it was A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana, and I absolutely loved this. I did expect to love this because I really loved her other book, The Fairy Secret Society for Irregular Witches, and gave that one 5 stars. And to be honest, I just followed suit with this one and ended up giving this one 5 stars as well. I think this one is the epitome of cozy fantasy. We've got our main character Sarah, who when she was young made a bit of a mistake with her magic and ended up losing it and being shunned from the magical guild within this world. So it's set in England, so it is quite cozy, and basically since she was young she's been trying to figure out a way to get her magic back and get back into that guild. She feels like a part of her is missing, but for most of her life she's also been helping her Aunt Jasmine run this inn within this small village, and honestly the inn was kind of half the reason I really, really loved this. We've got a sentient inn which kind of gives the dwellers what they need at that time. We've got a ragtag group of people who are living there. We've got a young man who thinks he's a knight. We've got an old woman who's really invested in kind of making the vegetables grow. We've got Sarah, the main character's nephew, living there, and we just have this whole ragtag group of people who are really a found family essentially, and it just made me really want to live in this inn. I just wanted to pack my bags and go and move and live with them. Our main protagonist Sarah was an instant favourite for me. She was kind of characterised as quite grumpy in this sense, you know, she's just trying to get by. She's not really the usual protagonist that's kind of motivating and positive all the time. She was definitely the grumpy within this, and actually the MMC was also grumpy, so it was really interesting reading a kind of grumpy ex grumpy trope rather than it being that grumpy ex sunshine. But I think it worked so well together. And our MMC is actually a historian who works with the guild that Sarah has kind of been outcast from, and he also has a little sister within this who is autistic and also has magic like Sarah and Luke, and he's been basically trying to find a place for her to fit in because her parents couldn't deal with her because they just thought it was too much. He tried to take her to the guild because he thought it'd be easier to find somewhere where she can kind of be happy and safe because of the magic surrounding them, but unfortunately the guild also have some rules that she just cannot comprehend, and she doesn't really fit there either. When they get to the end, she's obviously quite comfortable there, and he starts to think that this may be a good place for his sister to live. And basically the story goes from there. Sarah and Luke kind of reluctantly ally together to try and find out a way to get her magic back, and honestly just from the first page I felt like I'd been whisked away to this cozy little magical inn, and it just had everything I love. It had found family, it had slow burn romance, and honestly I just didn't want to leave this story. I'll definitely be adding this to my comfort read list because I think if you have a day where it's really rainy and you just have a hot cup of tea and you just want to read something, this is the book to pick up. It's the perfect cozy vibe. So yeah, absolutely loved this one, gave it 5 stars. Next up I read Curious Tides by Pascal Lascelles, and this is a dark academia. It is a YA, and we're following a young woman who is the only survivor from her class after a treacherous night of dark magic, and we start off the story as she's trying to figure out what happened that night, how she ended up surviving, and her best friend who also died that night, she's trying to figure out what happened to see if there's any way to get them back, and she has a lot of survivor's guilt because of this, obviously trying to work through that. And then we also get introduced to her best friend's brother who kind of ends up reluctantly allying with her to try and get those answers that she's been seeking as well. And I think with this one it had all the right ingredients on paper for me. So it had secret societies, it was dark academia, there was tide and moon magic in terms of the magic system in here. It had some really gorgeous atmospheric writing as well. However, for some reason it didn't quite land right for me, and it wasn't really the 5-star that I was anticipating with this one. In terms of the things I loved about this one, I definitely enjoyed the setting and the aesthetic. I think it felt very gloomy throughout. You could kind of see, you know, crumbling buildings, and it really set into that dark academic setting and gave a bit of an air of foreboding around the characters. So I do think that was executed perfectly. I really enjoyed the magic system in here as well. The fact that it was kind of lunar magic and it was tied to the phases of the moon was pretty unique from what I've read. I've definitely read some lunar magic before, but just the way it was done in here definitely felt a bit more unique. And then I also really loved the MMC within here. He was very endearing from the first time we were introduced to him. I was really rooting for him the entire way through. And within his POV, we definitely got a lot more intrigue in terms of the storyline and a lot more twists and things like that. So I just really loved being in his POV while I was reading this. On the flip side, our FMC, who is the main character we're kind of following here, I didn't really love her perspective, and I actually felt she came across as quite entitled, and I couldn't understand her motives, and I just couldn't find myself rooting for her the way I believe we were supposed to. She done a lot of things that I can kind of understand were in the aim of the greater good, but I just couldn't back her for them, so it kind of jarred my reading experience when we were in her POV. I do also think that the pacing was a little bit uneven within this one. There's a lot of world building and a lot of richness within here, but I could really feel the world building, and I could really kind of understand that we are getting told world building while I was reading it, so I was just really conscious of that while reading it. And it is a pretty long book, and I think it may have benefited from being a little bit shorter and a little bit snappier when it comes to the narrative, as the story didn't really fully kick in until the last 100 pages of this. And then there is a bit of a love triangle in here, and it honestly just felt a little bit forced. I think it was unnecessary. I don't think it added anything to the narrative. I could see what it was trying to do, but unfortunately it just didn't spark anything within me. So yeah, for me it just felt a little bit unnecessary. Overall, I think I liked it. I just didn't love it. I am still intrigued to see maybe what the second book has to offer. The writing was really lush. The world is quite complex, and I do think there is definitely something to offer in this, but I think it just got a bit bogged down with its own mythology, with the heaviness of that world building and the pacing when I was reading it. But I think if you do like a slower fantasy, if you like anything that has kind of those gothic and dark academic vibes, I do think you'll still enjoy this. If you enjoyed The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake or A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, while I don't think this is necessarily on par with them, I do think it has the same kind of vibe, so you may have better luck than me with this one if you enjoyed those, especially if you're just here for kind of the dark academic vibes and aesthetic. But yeah, as I say, unfortunately just didn't fully land for me, so I ended up rating this one 3.5 overall. Next up, I read Everlong by R. Rieta, or R. Rita. I'm not really sure how to pronounce this author's name, but this was kind of pitched to me as being Addie LaRue vibes and a lot of character-driven narrative and a bit of a slower paced fantasy, and I definitely think that's exactly what this gave. In this one we're following Lily, who doesn't remember anything about her life. She basically sits at this park bench every night and makes up stories about these inanimate objects within the park just to pass her time. One day Sam, who's a young man, just walks by her and notices her sitting there, and it's not the best area, it's a little bit dodgy, and basically he tries to befriend her to help to keep her safe, and the story kind of goes from there. We're really just following their friendship building and seeing where that leads. And the first thing I'll say about this is that the writing is absolutely beautiful. If you like flowery and purple prose, you'll definitely enjoy the writing style within here. I know it's not for everyone, but for me it's just something I really love, and I think this executed it perfectly. It's one of those ones where everything that's happening within the story is quite quiet, but each word has meaning in here, each word has depth, and you really could probably annotate the entire book and just highlight every sentence because it's so beautifully written. So that's the first thing I'll say about it. The romance in here is very soft, it's very slow burn, friends to lovers. They're very tentative with each other. There's no drama, there's no toxicity. It's just kind of watching these two people who just genuinely care about each other, building a relationship around that, and I just thought it was really beautiful to read about. I feel like the FMC, as well as the MMC, but the FMC in particular is very endearing. She's very easy to love and very easy to root for, and was definitely quite heartbreaking when we were kind of exploring some of her trauma and her grief throughout as we found out more about this girl. And overall, I think I just really loved this. It is very character driven, so don't go into this expecting a huge plot and shifts within the plot. It is very much more character driven within this, so very much like Addie LaRue. If you've read that, you may understand what I mean by that, but it was just such a quietly beautiful story. I did dock the tiniest half star because in the middle it lagged a tiny bit, so I just couldn't in my heart of hearts give this a 5 star because I know there was a little bit of it that I was kind of trudging through. However, overall I just highly recommend this for anyone who loves a character driven story, who, as I say, love the vibes of Addie LaRue. This definitely stands on its own. It's not a copy and paste or anything, but it definitely gave those vibes. So if you enjoyed Addie LaRue, you'll probably enjoy this one as well. But just be warned that this one is bittersweet. That's all I will say. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's a bittersweet story, so just be ready for that. So yeah, if you like slow and emotional reads, I think this is the one that you need to pick up, and I haven't heard anyone else talking about it, so hopefully if it sounds like something you like, you will pick this one up. It was on Kindle Unlimited as well. This is an indie author. But yeah, just really glad that I ended up picking this one up this month. Next up, I read Anathema by Carrie Lake, and this is another indie author that I actually done a vlog reading only indie authors for a week, so I'll put that in the description below if you are interested. But I ended up picking this one up even though it has technically been traditionally published now and it will be coming out next month. It's one that I've seen a lot of people talk about and a lot of people really rave about, saying that it was quite a complex and rich world in here. Very gothic, kind of dark leaning, but also has that romanticy subplot in here, and I definitely think that's what I got in here. I would say that it was probably more 50-50 with the fantasy and the romance, but that's absolutely perfect for me. I do really enjoy that balance, and I actually really enjoyed this one as well. We've got a main character, Maeve, who lives in this town where she's basically been shunned because she's different. You know, it's a very religious town. Women are treated quite badly here, and they're kind of using religion to push their own negative agenda rather than using it for good or anything like that. So there's a bit of kind of religious trauma in here, so trigger warnings for that. But as I say, we have Maeve, who has always been drawn to basically these dark woods that are beside the town. No one will go in there. People say there's a curse on the woods, but obviously our main character has always been drawn to them and might end up venturing within there. There is a cursed lord of the woods as well that our main character ends up kind of reluctantly allying with to get herself out of this situation, but he also has some kind of underlying motivations for working with her as well, and that's all I really want to give about this one. There is quite a lot that goes on in here. I think the world was pretty rich, it was pretty complex as well, and it definitely gave that kind of dark and gritty foreboding feeling while I was reading this one. Our main character Maeve was an FMC that it was so easy to root for. Her isolation and her trauma from her backstory were really palpable when you were reading about it, and you could really feel that isolation and how desolate she felt, and kind of her motivations for going into the wood that obviously no one else would in their own mind go into. She kind of had nothing left to lose, and it kind of helped with that motivation and understanding of her and why she would do anything to try and make hers and her sister's life much better than it was at that time. We do get quite a lot of background on our MMC as well. He's definitely very brooding and dark, but we do get to understand that he has quite a lot of trauma from his own past as well, and you can see why he's so guarded and why he has that kind of, it is quite tropey in terms of, you know, the dark and brooding MMC who's only dark and brooding when it comes to everybody else but our main female character. But I really liked about this one the exploration that we got for that. It wasn't just his demeanour, he wasn't just this tough guy. There was reasons behind that guardedness, and I really feel like that helped me connect with the characters a lot more. And overall I'd say that their relationship was very much slow burn, and for about the first 70% you were kind of begging for crumbs of their interactions together. So exactly how I like it. I really love a slow burn, and I think it was done really well in here. There are some very heavy themes in here, so check out some trigger warnings for that, but I do think we also had some side characters in here that definitely elevated the tone and lifted the lightness a little bit, as without them it would have been an extremely heavy book. But it did also have me chuckling at times as well because of some of those side characters. But yeah, I think if you're drawn to kind of gothic atmosphere, emotional stories with slow burn romance, morally grey characters, then I think you'll really enjoy this one. I did knock off 1 star just because the second half of it felt a lot more tropey than the first half, and I'm not sure if it was kind of just fan service where there were certain tropes that the author wanted to get in there, or if they just happened to be within the story, but to me they didn't feel as natural within the narrative as the first half did, and I could kind of see it's a, okay, here's that trope, okay, we've got another trope. It didn't feel as natural, where in the first half of the book I didn't really notice that. Even if there were tropes in there, I wasn't picking it up, so there was a bit of a juxtaposition between that feeling on the first half and the second half. So I did end up docking just 1 star off this one and giving it 4 stars overall, but really excited for the second book in this one. I believe it comes out this month, so I'll definitely be picking that up because the way this one ends definitely made me intrigued to see where the story goes. So yeah, overall highly recommend this one and really excited to read the second book. Okay, so next up I'm going to talk about a kind of series that I ended up reading. I ended up binging the first 3 books within the series, and the 4th one is going to be out in October and I cannot wait to read it. But it's basically the Sutton Bay series, and the first book within that series is Those Two Words, and this is by Ronnie Matthews. Again, she is an indie contemporary romance author, and I think this is actually the first indie contemporary romance I've ever read, and I'm pretty impressed. I was really impressed with this one. Definitely think this is good for anyone who likes the likes of Elsie Silver or small town romance, giving you the kind of Hallmark movie theme with a little bit of spice in there as well. That's basically what you get when you're looking at these, and overall I just felt like these books were definitely a bit of a warm hug of books. And yes, they may have fallen into a lot of the tropes of contemporary romance, but it was just done so well. I really loved the characters within here. I loved the small town. I could really feel like I was there, and yeah, I just think they're so bingeable, and it was really easy easy to fall in love with all the characters. Within this first book, we're following Patrick and Joanna, who have been childhood sweethearts and childhood friends for the entirety of their lives. Their family are very close because they own a restaurant together, and everyone always kind of thought that these two would be together. 6 years ago, something happens and Joanna moves away without a word to anyone, and she hasn't basically seen Patrick since. Fast forward those 6 years and the restaurant is kind of struggling, and Joanna's father actually asks her to come back to help with the restaurant. Patrick is the restaurant manager at the moment, so obviously they have to work together, and the story goes from there. As I say, these were just really wholesome on one side, but also kind of spicy on the other side, but it gave me an overall wholesome kind of Hallmark movie feel when I was reading these ones. But just be worried, there is spice in here, so if you do like it, obviously that's great. If you don't like spice, there was a fair amount of it in here, but I think it was really well done and it didn't kind of overtake the story or anything. There was still a pretty good narrative in here, so do with that what you will. I just always like to point out if there is spice within books, because I know it can be quite polarizing on whether people like that or they don't, but this is definitely open door romance. But I just loved all the characters. I love the interconnecting books. So the next two books were called Just One Moment and then All We Need, I believe, and then the last one is called Our Long Days. But basically read them all within 5 days or something like that, the first three, and I cannot wait for the fourth book. But yeah, if you're looking for a new kind of cozy small town romance read, you've loved Elsie Silver or anything like that in the past, definitely check out this series. I definitely think it's going to blow up soon. Really entertaining. I really loved it, and I think I gave all the books around 4 stars. They definitely were 5 stars for me, even though, you know, I've kind of been gushing about the series, but I would say that in my heart of hearts they're around a 4 star in terms of rating. But if you love contemporary romance and if you're looking for a small town romance, I cannot recommend the series enough. Next up, I read a book by one of my favourite, or at least fast becoming one of my favourite authors. It's Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher, and this is just out, this just came out in August, and I think basically the day that I received it I ended up picking it up and reading it, and I'm so glad I did because I ended up really loving this one. This one is a bit of a loose Snow White retelling. We've got a healer who is called to the king to help with his daughter because she is kind of suffering with this ailment that no one can work out. The healer is an expert in poison, so they're hoping she's going to be able to find a solution to this issue, and the story kind of goes from there. I think this one was definitely the signature quirky and cozy dark fairy tale retelling that I've got used to with reading some of T. Kingfisher's other books. I think this definitely encompassed her writing style perfectly, and I really loved RFMC Anya in this one, and I just found her inner monologue absolutely hilarious. It had me giggling from page to page, and I think some of her more cozy fairy tale retellings are a bit more vibes over plot. I think there was definitely a lot of plot in here, and again I was really invested in figuring out how it was going to happen. I actually think it had obviously the Snow White retelling in there, but it had a little bit of Alice in Wonderland vibes, and I really loved that. The meshing of those two together was absolutely perfect for me. This is definitely not a romance, but there is a romance subplot in here that I absolutely loved. I really loved it, and again it was one of those ones with all those little interactions between them. I was just giggling, kicking my feet and begging for crumbs of those two together. And yeah, as I say, it's definitely not a romance book, but if you like romantasy, you'll definitely be satisfied with the romance that's in here. But overall, I think I can't recommend this one higher. If you've enjoyed any of her previous cozy fantasies, or if you're new to reading T. Kingfisher, I would definitely recommend this one as well. It's very accessible, really fun, cozy but dark fairy tale retelling, and I think it would definitely give you a really good idea of the type of author she is on this side of things. She does have more horror leaning novels as well, but in terms of her more cozy and fairy tale retelling side, this definitely gives you a good idea of her writing style. And yeah, absolutely loved it. It didn't have the 5-star feeling, but I did give it 4.5 stars, so it was very close. And yeah, just so happy that I read this one, and as I say, it's kind of solidifying my love for T. Kingfisher and putting her up there as one of my favourite authors. Next up, I read one of the oldest books on my physical TBR, and that's These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, and this one's a bit of a Romeo and Juliet retelling. It's based in 1920s in Shanghai, and we've got two rival gangs who are basically vying for power within Shanghai at this time. One of the heirs to those gangs is Roma, who is obviously Romeo, and then we have Juliet on the other side. And basically the gangs come up across this issue as there's a monster within Shanghai that is essentially killing off a lot of their gang members, and obviously numbers mean power, and they want to try and figure out how to combat this. Roma and Juliet end up reluctantly allying together. They haven't seen each other in quite some time. There was an issue that happened 5 or 6 years ago, and they haven't seen each other since. So obviously tensions are quite high there. There's a lot of angst there, but they end up reluctantly allying together to try and figure out a solution to this issue, and the story goes from there. This one definitely had more mafia gang vibes than fantasy vibes. It is always in the fantasy section because of kind of the monster element within here, but if you took that away and there was just a different issue that they were were tackling. This is very much more of a mafia gang type of story. So just to preface with that, it was a little bit jarring when I first read it because I thought there would be more magic within there, but it definitely felt a bit more like an urban gang, maybe historical read rather than kind of a pure fantasy. But I did really love kind of the world that Chloe Gong built here. It definitely felt quite immersive, and I could really kind of picture myself in all of the settings that she built here. It was very dark yet glittering, and you could really feel the palpable kind of political machinations that were going on at this time within Shanghai. I think Juliet and Roma are both really messy and almost unlikable characters for most of the time. They are very flawed. They're in a bit of a difficult situation in terms of their position within their own gangs, and it was really clear to see that with that. And I really loved that characterization, that they weren't these perfect paragons of, you know, virtue, and they weren't just morally grey. They were definitely flawed. There were some morally black things that they done within here as well, and it just really fit with the kind of gang mentality that you're reading about. So I really appreciated that she done that with the characters. And basically I was just really hooked with the story in here. It covers a lot of different themes, from identity, loyalty, betrayal, colonialism, and there's definitely a lot packed in here to keep you intrigued. It did lull a little bit in the middle for me because obviously we do have one main mystery that they're trying to solve, and that was basically the narrative for the entire book. So it felt a little bit slow in the middle for me, and I wasn't really sure if it was definitely going to be a book for me, but the end of it definitely pulled it right back up for me. There was a lot of twists and turns, and I am very intrigued for book 2 with the way that this one ended. So as I say, a few things to kind of point out: that it definitely felt less like a fantasy and a lot more like a historical gang novel, but overall I still really enjoyed it. It's definitely not my usual genre in terms of what I usually enjoy, but really glad I read it, really glad I got it off my kind of TBR shelf, and I'll be excited to read the second book now that I've read this one. But overall I ended up rating this one 4 stars just because of that lull in the middle, but would still highly recommend this one. Then next up I was looking for a bit of a easy contemporary read for a nighttime read because I only had a physical book at that time and I wanted something on my Kindle, and I ended up picking up Right Move by Liz Tom Ford. And obviously I think this is the Windy City series, I believe it's called, and it's pretty much having a moment on BookTok, BookTube, Bookstagram. Everyone loves this. If you love contemporary romance, you've probably already read this series. I haven't read the first book in the series, but I'd heard a lot about kind of the MMC within there, and I just knew it wasn't going to be something that I would enjoy. So I ended up going to the second book, which is The Right Move, and in this one we're following Ryan Shea, who is a famous basketball player who is actually the brother of the FMC from the first book. So obviously if you read the first book you'd have that connection there, but I think you get enough kind of background within this book to jump straight into book 2. I didn't feel confused, I didn't feel like I was missing any information, so if you don't want to read the first book you can just jump into the second book. And basically within this, his sister has a friend who is at a loss. She's just broken up with her long-term boyfriend and she needs somewhere to live. His sister asks him if she can move in with him just to help get her on her feet, and he reluctantly agrees. He's quite private, you know, obviously because he's quite famous he has paparazzi and everything around him, but he reluctantly agrees to let her live with him, and the story goes from there. It's got fake dating, it's got angst, it's got tension, bit of mutual pining there as well, and overall I had a fun time with this one. I do think it was a little long. I think it could have been a bit shorter, but I did really enjoy the story. I don't think it was anything kind of different than what I've read in some of these contemporary romances, but it was entertaining. It did keep me intrigued. I probably will follow on because some of the side characters that were in there, I think they have their own books, so I'd be interested to see what their stories entail, but overall enjoyed this one. Definitely kept me entertained and rated it 4 stars. And then last up for the month I read Girl, Goddess, Queen by Bev Fitzgerald, and again this is one of the older books on my physical TBR, so really glad to have picked this up this month. And this one is a Persephone and Hades retelling. It's kind of following Persephone from being quite young, being in this quite restrictive world within the gods and things like that, and essentially this is supposed to be a bit of a feminist retelling of her taking back her power and her identity and kind of doing what she wants for herself, and I do think it delivered on that. However, I do think it was a little on the nose with some of the kind of the feminist messaging that it was trying to convey. I do know this is YA, so maybe that's why it was a bit more kind of in your face and a bit less subtle, but for me it kind of lost the messaging because it was so in your face and it was a bit too on the nose for me. However, I do think that it had overall a pretty light and humorous tone. It was definitely a different take on the kind of Hades and Persephone retellings. It didn't have kind of that dark overtone. There was definitely some dark themes in here because obviously we're talking about Greek mythology. There is a lot of dark themes within that inherently, but overall I think it's had a bit more of a light and humorous tone. It was probably a bit more akin to a rom-com, and I'm not sure if that's maybe why it didn't mesh with me as much as I would have liked, because I didn't think the genres really meshed in my head personally. So It could be just a me thing with this one, but I think if you like kind of rom-coms with a little bit of a Greek mythology retelling in there, you may end up enjoying this one a little bit more. And I think actually from this author, if she wrote a contemporary romance, I think I would be intrigued to read it because I did like the banter between the two characters. I kind of like the shift that she put on the personas of the characters as well, but overall it just didn't land for me the way I was hoping, so ended up rating this one 3.25. Unfortunately, I don't think I will continue in kind of the interconnected standalone series that she has in this one, but I think if you're getting an intro to Greek mythology, you may enjoy this, and if you like contemporary romance and you're looking to delve into this, I think this is a good mesh between the two, and you may enjoy this one a little bit more than I did. Okay, so that's everything. That's all the books I read in August. As I say, I think overall I had a really good month. Most books were 4-star or over, you know, just one or two that maybe dipped a little bit below that, but none of them were kind of terrible books or books that I hated, so you really can't ask for more than that. Let me know if you've read any of these and if you agree with my ratings for these, if you disagree, and also let me know what your favourite book was in August. And if you don't have anything to comment, just put a little book emoji in the comments to let me know you got to the end. If you like this video, do remember to give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, remember to subscribe. I post 2 videos per week, and it's videos like this, so reading wrap-ups, TBR jars, book shopping, all good bookish things like that. Other than that, thanks so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one soon. Bye!